call the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Thank you, Patrick. Can we do the roll call, Paul?
Megan? Brian? Brooks? Rob? Alyssa? Mike? And Barb.
Here. Okay. Any changes to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Toad second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Consent calendar.
Ed Brink motion to approve.
Bassett, I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar on pages 3 and 4. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, minutes are on 5 and 6. Any corrections?
I, Alyssa P. Keeley, will move to approve the minutes.
Okay. Got a motion.
Toad second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Public comments. Anybody here to make a public comment other than on a particular item on the agenda? Okay. Rezone application on page 7. Take us away, Patrick.
Yep. So a couple meetings ago, this originally came up for a public hearing. It was continued pending further information. What we have received since then is an updated plat showing the contiguousness necessary for the PD, being lot 17 is included as well. Then we received a couple of documents being the intent to purchase the property. They'll create an HOA that'll manage. The city's concern is if you have one utility connection going to the property and one person doesn't pay, we don't want to shut the other 3 off as well. So this ultimately makes the HOA responsible for the utility payments, as well as there is an agreement that will be filed with all the lots. And the draft starting on page 16, it applies to one of them, but similar agreements will be provided for the other ones. Just to facilitate it along, they didn't want to go through all the legal work of creating them ahead of time. So those will be filed as well. If you wanted to add that as in the special area regulations, A mentions the HOA. If you wanted B to ensure the agreement is filed and maintained, we can do that as well. But this is what is presented to as the creation and the rezone to the 9th Avenue plan development. We have received 2 public comments, both generally related to a couple of residents. I don't think they actually lived there. One might, one wasn't sure. They were concerned that since these are affordable rentals that were generally very accommodating for seniors, they were limited entry, you didn't have to go up steps, they were good for seniors. They were concerned that taking these out of the rental supply would limit senior housing options. So, and one was concerned, she didn't think it applied to her, but she wasn't sure. She was concerned that should this become for sale, that she wasn't sure where she would go. So those were the 2 public comments we received. So the applicant is present to answer any questions you have.
I got a couple of questions. So the intent would be the access easement agreement would be duplicated for the other 3.
Correct. And Ron can address that as well.
There you go. Ron Weber, 27521 481st Avenue, Canton, South Dakota, 57013. Yes, those will all be applied. We just didn't want to spend the extra cost of having them all spelled out right now. But yes, and that is going to be covered in that HOA because I know that was a major concern if someone didn't pay their water bill. And I checked with all of the HOAs in Sioux Falls, and we are going to follow that procedure. That way, it's tied to the HOA. So if Ron doesn't pay his water bill, the HOA get charged for it. They have to pay it. And then they have to go after each individual.
Couple other comments on the specific agreement. It talks about the backyard. So one issue I have is, we have a definition in our ordinance of what a backyard is. And getting to the backyard, I think, should also be included in the agreement, which would be access to the side yards. And the front yard driveway to get to the side yard to go around the house. So not just across the backyard, but I think it also needs to include verbiage in there about front yard access, getting across the driveway, getting around the house through the side yard to access the rear yard. The other thing, maybe a technicality, it talks about pedestrian travel only. My concern would be if an elderly individual needs to mow their lawn with a riding lawnmower, or if someone ever needs to do maintenance on their house, that maybe they need to, dig or move in some small equipment to do a remodel, they would not have access to bring in that type of equipment across someone else's yard. So that's up to you guys what you want to do. I'm not an attorney, but just looking at all the possibilities associated with that access. And then it doesn't really say how wide that access needs to be. It talks about a 6 foot wide gate, but so just some things that kind of struck me as some possible issues down the road.
Okay. The 6 foot that's what they figure for a standard commercial lawnmower. That's how they figured the 6 foot gate. And, I think John had spelled that out there. The attorney wrote up the agreement that you could have access through the neighbor's yard with their consent. Is, how I read that, how John wanted that portrayed in there, that if I needed to get into your yard for some of that purpose, to bring in, whatever, a little ditch witch or something, that, as long as I had permission from you, I could do that.
But it talks about going through the backyard, but on those end lots, you'll have to go around the house. So you'll actually have to have access through the front yard, the side yard, and the rear yard, not just the rear yard.
So you're looking for that to be spelled out in there also.
That would be my suggestion, just
Do you want that on the agreement or just in the HOA?
in this access agreement.
Okay,
Do you understand what I'm saying, Rob?
Yep.
Yeah.
yep.
So, Patrick, where are we at in this process? I've kind of lost track.
Yep. So these are the public hearings, both on the rezone from R2 to this new PD, as well as the creation language of the PD. So it's kind of a two-parter. Yes, ultimately you would make a recommendation one way or the other to the city council.
And then would it be on the council's agenda the next time?
It would be on the agenda for March 3rd.
Okay, so we can get this moving along.
And if your recommendation was to recommend a city council with the inclusion of some language, that could be the motion.
I have a, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was gonna say, on, page 18, number 8, it says unimpeded access. Does that give suffice access to the property? It doesn't say front yards or side yards, but it does say the declarant and successors in interest agree that no barricade or other divider will be constructed between or throughout the lots, and they will do nothing to prohibit or discourage the free or uninterrupted use of the easements. But I guess that just talks about the easements, use of the easements. It doesn't really say that you have access to the easements, I guess, through the other property.
Would you want that, Michael, would you want that spelled out, just like what Brian is saying then, under that number 8, to spell out in the side yards, or where would you want that spelled out?
I agree with Brian because the access to these units is kind of unique since you can't get to the back from the house. So there's more opportunity for someone to be like, no, I'm not letting you go across here. If it was just for mowing or something like that, I think the HOA could have enough coverage on that. But when you're talking about someone needing to get to the backyard and they're bringing their friends or whatever, I don't think this is going to happen a lot in these units. But like you said, you have to walk across their front yard, their side yard, and then across their backyard. And I could see a situation in which someone would be like, not anymore. And if it's not spelled out, I think that could be a problem. You know, and it's too bad we didn't catch that sooner. But it is a unique because you can't get to it from the inside.
No, and I'm not an attorney. I would have John draw that. John Archer's the one who drew this up, and he draws up, a ton of those. The one drawing the HOA, that'll be Brent Lovren. He does probably 95% of all the HOAs in town. So he would be drawing up the HOA. John did the actual agreement. So you would want it spelled out in the agreement here and not in the HOA, correct? Is what you're telling me here?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where we want that.
And
So-
where it would be spelled out is roughly in 2A and B. I think that's where it talks about the easement being across the backyard of a particular lot. So that would include
Just include the front and
front
side
and
yards,
as well.
is what you're telling me. Yep, okay.
Otherwise, for the sake of the two people that had public comments, they could not attend. But have you notified every tenant in the building that potentially of the shift?
We have not. When I was doing my market analysis there,
Yep.
a few of them approached because they recognize me. And, and they've approached Troy also, probably 4 or 5 of the tenants, wondering if they would, could buy them individually. So I don't know if one of them was that reached out or not, but we have not made this public knowledge that,
Okay.
we're not going to get everyone rattled if this doesn't pass.
Yep.
So,
In the event that one of those people reached out, they did not provide their name. They provided the general area where they lived. I mean, this is not a condition or anything, but if you could let them, if it seems to be going well, let them know as soon as you can. I'm sure they would probably appreciate it.
okay.
Did they email you? How did you get
It was a
communication?
phone call.
Phone call.
2 phone calls.
Okay. They read it someplace.
So when we send out the 300-foot notice, I imagine they got one. So
Oh.
I don't know if they live there or if they live within 300 feet. I'm not sure.
Are we ready for a motion?
Do we need to have that easement fixed before we do a rezone, or just how do we want to handle that? Change our whole-
I think you can put it as a condition.
I think
can't you?
we make it a condition to add that additional language in the agreement.
And then as long as that condition's met when it goes to city council.
Question on that. That's on the 3rd.
Correct.
Yeah, and so I could have that to you and then you could all review it before then? Or would that be okay? Because this has been very good. I'm going to applaud you guys with Patrick and me. We've had a good relationship of getting stuff back and forth and it's worked out well. So I can have John do that, probably work on it tomorrow or Friday. Wait a minute, tomorrow is Friday, isn't it? So tomorrow or Monday. So whatever. But, I could get that probably within the next couple days for you.
And if I'm correct, if we pass it with the condition of it being met, then it just needs to be met before city council approves it.
Yep.
On the 3rd.
So it wouldn't have to come to us again. We wouldn't have to look at it.
Well, I will get it to Patrick. That way he can put his eyes on it. So.
And when it comes to the city council public hearing, I hope they'll go back and listen or watch this meeting to figure out what was talked about it. But if not, we'll mention kind of the process we've been through and what your motion was. And when we do the planning and zoning recommended approval, we'll mention with this condition. seems to be found in 2A and B.
So I'll make a motion, but before I do, I just wanna make sure, so the conditions would be, including side yard and front yard in the access agreement. Is there any other conditions? All right, this is Hyde Brink, I'll make a motion to, recommend, approval of this to council with the modifications to the agreement, the access agreement, to include front yard and side yard, as part of the verbiage.
Totes second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? So I want to commend this council. I want to commend you and Troy and Patrick for everyone working together to get this done. It was a unique situation, and this is public-private cooperation at its best, I think. So appreciate that, and all the meetings that you've sat through.
No, and I want to thank you guys, because this was my first rodeo doing this as a plan development, so I've learned a lot, and I want to thank you for cooperating with us. So, just a side note, before I come out here, you know, that lady's talking about affordable housing, or affordable rental housing. There is one house less than 320,000 for sale in Brandon right now, and it's on 9th Street. So, that's how affordable housing we need. There's 2 under contract, and then the next one was 319. So, thank you all for your time, and I will get that, Patrick, I'll get that to you in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy. All right. Many meeting process, but that went well. All right. Are we on to conditional use, Patrick?
Correct, for Hazelnut Street.
Okay. Is there someone here to speak to that?
So I thought Nick would be here, but he does not seem to be. So this is the Chestnut Ridge development. A while back, you approved a conditional use permit to allow single-family attached greater than 36. This is that property. They are requesting a second driveway. Since you get one by right, but any two a lot, if you want an additional one, it takes a conditional use permit. They want a driveway off of East Hazelnut Street on what would be the western half and the eastern half of their lot, so to service the townhomes.
Did we ask them to bring this back, or I don't remember? We had this before us, right?
This one was not. The
This one
previous
was
one we
not?
talked about was for Les Schwab.
Oh.
So, a lot of second driveways being requested.
So am I seeing this right? Both proposed driveways are off of Hazelnut, one towards each end?
Correct.
Is that what I'm looking at? Okay.
Does the city have any concerns with the location of them, or what might be going to the north, or anything like that lining up?
That's R2 on the north of it, isn't it?
I think so. I think those are where he intends to have duplexes. I think.
He just submitted some stuff. They have not been platted yet. So we're gonna start the review process and become platted.
Have they talked about, so they're talking about doing this in phases, starting from the west and working their way east. Have they worked with the city on maintaining, continuous access in there, since they don't have room to turn a fire truck around?
So it is zoned R2 to the north. Yes, and we did work with the fire department to make sure that they could utilize that. So they're looking at doing their next section of improvements as well. So all of their DEPs are approved.
The first phase would only go up to where the west driveway is at.
West.
And then phase two, and it wouldn't be until phase three that the second driveway is put in, which would allow circular, routing of emergency vehicles through that parcel. I was just curious if phase one and phase two included a temporary road to get emergency vehicles through the property, turned around and back out of there.
Yeah, we don't have a complete site plan for it yet. They're still working through some of that. They sent in kind of a plan set and then we gave them their initial comments.
Okay.
And so they were just making sure that the driveways worked and that they will. But I'll make a note of that to make sure we have something.
Okay.
Are they planning on doing the road in phases too, or would they do the road all at one time and then just build out in phases, do you know?
The road's there already, isn't it? You say Hazelnut's already there.
Yeah, Hazelnut is already there.
But the
Yeah.
Hazelnut,
But
but the private drive, is the private drive completed?
No,
But,
not
would
within
they-
this lot.
Would
have
they
not.
complete all of the private drive before they phase it out, or would they build that as a phase as well?
They don't really have those phasings laid out. I'm gonna guess that if they're in there doing all the utilities at one time, they're gonna do all the grading at the same time. They're probably just not gonna pave it all.
I guess I'll make a recommendation to approve the conditional use as submitted.
Shonen second.
Okay, any more questions or discussion on this? So this is just the conditional use for the second driveway is what we're voting on, okay? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. And are we ready for cell tower? Jonah, you get to spend a lot of time with us. Yeah, I know you love us. Yeah. We'll take ya. Yeah, we'll take ya.
We just moved through a Plan PD, so we got something done. Maybe it's a good sign for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Good evening again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm Jonas Snyder, 5313 Southeast Wind Avenue.
So
Sioux Falls.
what's new here is, so the third party language is still there. So the general section stuff is still there about the 1.1 times the tower height. We still have some terms that Brian mentioned at the last meeting that we need to sync up. If that's something we want done on this draft, I can attempt to get that done for March 6th. It's just a quick turnaround. If that's something we want to try to sync up terms and definitions and everything, we can get a draft done there. We're still, the ongoing FCC compliance is still there. The big difference is for the general business district with Alliance's lot, we have, how would we want to deal with neighborhood utility and public utility facilities? Would you want to discuss lot sizes and setbacks? We would conceptually consider that to be one of that, as well as the cell tower you talked about not requiring a minimum lot area or minimum lot width. The setbacks, then we would determine on in the section itself. So we would go back up here and write something about setbacks, whether you wanted the tower to have setbacks, or so long as it's surrounded by a fence and is inside the fence, then no setbacks were required. So that's kind of what's left open. You talked about that lot would probably be best zoned general business. So the same thing is written into the, so that's kind of where we're at. We're getting close to the end, whether you'd want similar changes to institutional. We talked about keeping both, but this situation might be more suited for general business. So that is where we are, and hopefully we can get closer. That's the draft as presented.
So Jonah, if we get this worked out, you have confirmation from Alliance that they would sell you that land. Is that correct?
So we would be a lesser of the
Or-
land, but
okay.
yeah, I just was meeting with them about this week, and they've agreed to rezone to general business. They wanted to confirm, which I sent you an email late in the day, Patrick, that by rezoning to general business, they're not going to suddenly, their building's going to be out of compliance, which I think is maybe a concern with the setbacks. But I think it's already out of compliance, zoned as NRC.
Rezoning, I don't think would create any additional nonconformities. If planning and zoning and the city council wanted to talk about how we wanted to treat utility facilities in terms of setbacks, that could potentially bring them back into compliance depending on what those numbers are.
Yeah, it's a pretty small lot.
Right now it's NRC and the lot doesn't meet NRC requirements, so it is technically non-conforming now. So
What's the rear setback on general business?
probably 10.
I was thinking last time when we looked at it, it would actually fit in the general business setbacks, but it wasn't gonna fit in institutional, and it doesn't fit in NRC.
Unless it's
So it's 5.
on the other side of a residential.
So I think it will actually fit, not confirming that, but it will fit certainly better in general business than it does in the current zoning or in institutional, so.
Yeah, that's our hope.
And as far as spot zoning is concerned, the comp plan does have a lot of the open area to the east as being commercial. So that necessarily wouldn't be too out of the ordinary. It would just be a continuation of the line of commercial. And while we are currently working on a first draft for discussion of the comp plan, it's likely our intent that that would remain the same unless there was some need to change that. We have seen rough plans for that area, but they are rough plans, so I don't want to say too much about them, but that would generally be consistent as well.
If we would rezone this to general business, is that when the sign is going to go up on the lot? Because we need to be prepared for people coming in.
Correct. There would be a sign that would go up for a rezone as well as the conditional use permit for the tower itself. So it would be 2 public hearings.
Yeah, and we're hoping to submit the rezone to some extent concurrently with some of these language changes, because I realize there's a process. Verizon's going to kill me if I can't tell them that we can have a tower built by fall, so I'm doing everything I can to make that feasible.
So Patrick, I think, with a lot of this cleaning up verbiage and terms and things like that, my understanding, in order to keep this moving, for this applicant here, we need to change the wireless communication tower minimum lot area to not applicable, right?
Correct.
And we also need to change distance from residential. Instead of
Correct.
300 feet to the 1.1.
Those are, I believe, the two.
Those are
big
the two things
That's
that
correct.
are holding up this particular issue.
And
So-
any internal lot setbacks, if you said.
I don't think there's currently designated internal lot setbacks. Do I have that right, Patrick? So it's just a matter of whether or not you're wanting to impose those.
So right now, if it was general business, you would have a front yard setback of 25.7 per side and rear is 5. So
Okay.
that would conceptually apply unless they set it at something different. A tower structure is arguably different than a building. I think we talked about that last time as well. What you wanted to set those numbers at are certainly up to you, whether you wanted to do it on the table or generally in the district. If you wanted to do it on a district level versus an overall as a tower level. It's up to you how we want to slice
I guess
the pie.
I'd like to see it kept the same as a building setback. So, I think rather than adding a bunch of more things that could potentially complicate cleaning up our verbiage, I would like to see us just proceed with the minimum requirement to get this processed. And then we can clean up some of this other additional stuff later, like adding it to institutional.
Do the setbacks in general business present an issue for you?
So I'm looking at the 25-foot minimum lot width isn't a problem. The 25 foot front yard setback is going to be tight. I guess I need to measure it on your GIS. I'm showing that it's 14 yards from where the base of our tower would go to the front lot, but I'd probably better measure it on Brandon's software.
So
14 yards would
The
be
GIS is not 100% accurate, so you'll want a surveyor to actually.
okay. And we have it. We actually have a survey, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only problem we could bump into is I noticed I kind of had missed this maybe in the past, but it looks like you're measuring setbacks from any other ground-based structure, not just from the base of the tower. So we have to be if we put a H-frame, a utility rack, basically to run power to. Does that have to be 25 feet from the front of the lot?
I need you to rephrase your question.
Sorry. So basically, the tower needs a power source, and so we
Yes.
put in two big steel posts with some utility meters between them. Call that an H-frame.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if that also needs to meet a 25-foot setback from the front lot.
If it is a fundamental part of the principal structure, it's required to meet the principal structure setbacks. So if the tower could not operate but for the A-frame structure, then it's part of the tower, so it has to meet the setbacks.
Okay. Well then, yeah. In that case, we probably couldn't. Those typically are placed right on as close to the fence as you can get them. So that would be a problem for us. Just trying to get that in there.
And when they write rules, they're more concerned about overall applicability than just a particular site. So that's their concern is everywhere rather than just your site when they set numbers.
Sure. So if you can't meet setbacks, is there a process by which you request a variance or anything, or it's just you just can't apply?
You could request a variance to the setbacks. You would have to meet the variance threshold of the hardship with you can make no other reasonable use of the property. This is necessary. It's something relating to topography and all the requirements to get a variance. It would still apply.
But it's challenging to prove all that, probably.
Yes.
I guess the other concern would be that, yeah, I'm not totally certain that the Alliance building meets a 25-foot setback. I'd have to measure that.
And if that was non-conforming, it would certainly be allowed to stay. We won't, unless it was destroyed or purposely moved or all that kind of stuff. And non-conforming stays until something makes it not there.
Okay. If we could wedge the utility rack up as close to the top of the tower, to the top of the lot as we can, when Verizon comes to what we call co-locate on the site, or future tenant T-Mobile or AT&T, and then they put their ground-based equipment, which is separate from ours, how do the setbacks apply to that? So the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Likely, yes.
Because it's separate from the tower, but it is, it's communications equipment, I guess. So yeah, I guess I would request the commission consider allowing us to utilize the space in a way that we can still put ground-based equipment and not have that disqualify the site.
Did we talk anything about a carve out for this type of process because it's not, you can see through it, so it's different than, in my mind, different than a building? Do Did we talk about that or not?
I think that was for the tower, not for the other on-ground components. I guess I'd maybe be a little hesitant to start to allow leniency because we do allow neighborhood utility facilities even in residential areas, but we don't give them any additional leniency above and beyond what a residence requires.
Which is, so neighborhood utility facility has to be 25 feet back from a front lot.
Yes.
Okay. Pulling my survey here. Yeah, I think the lot from south to north is approximately 60 feet long. So we'd have to kind of fit everything in that back 35 feet or so, I guess is what we'd have to attempt to do to the best of our ability. So I just have to get back with the surveyor and see if that's feasible. I guess, and we have to be 5 feet from the rear lot, or rear line.
And 7 from the side.
Okay. Well, we'll do the best to make that work, I guess. I think we can work with that, see what we can do.
Put that puzzle together, right?
Yeah.
Unless you can get more land, I guess, that would be the other
Yeah.
solution. Or different land.
So
Yeah.
Patrick, if we do that, if we include those two changes, what's the timeline?
We could, so the paper, we'd send it to the paper, if we're probably looking at the second meeting in March. So the change would be in GB, neighborhood utility facility and public utility facility would probably lump into all other uses. They wouldn't be spelled out unless you wanted something different with the lot area or width. The tower would conceptually be different because it wouldn't have the lot width requirement. Would you want the same for the utility facilities, or would you just want those lumped under the broad category?
We don't specifically call them out in any other zoning district.
Correct.
So I guess I don't see the need to do it in general business because of what's happening here. I mean, if we want to reconsider that in all of our other zoning districts that allow that, then yes, but right now, if we're just talking about, cell towers, let's just keep it simple.
Those would be lumped then in, and wireless tower will be spelled out because of it has its own language, and especially with the height and the 60 feet, if you would require it to be less than that. So those two will be lumped back in. The utility facilities will be lumped back in.
Is there, I'm just kind of looking at, this is such a small lot, but is there a way that you could put your building like on the east side of the Alliance and then the tower on the west side? And is that, I don't know how your equipment works, but there's not much room to work there.
Yeah. Possibly. I'd have to talk with Alliance and see if we get their blessing to do that. We'd have to kind of change our lease footprint, but it may be theoretically possible. Yeah. We just have to run underground utilities. Normally it's above ground where you have, it's called an ice bridge that's kind of connecting the fiber and power from those facilities over to the tower, but we could, I could take a look at that and see if we can make that work. Try to get a little creative.
Kind of consuming their building on three sides then.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not sure how they feel about that, but you're just running out of space. So.
Yep. I'll take a look at that and meet with them and see. They're motivated to have the tower here as well because they're a fiber provider. So there's an opportunity for them to provide fiber to the tower that that's part of the reason why I think they're interested in this, so they might be willing to be flexible with us.
So
But-
one thing we're gonna have to be prepared for is why there. And I know that you have done you talked to a lot of different landowners and done
Right.
research about where it needs to be. We just need to be prepared with that information when we have the public hearing.
Yeah, and maybe I can write up another synopsis of that. That would be helpful for you guys. I can certainly submit that through Patrick or something. But I'm happy to respond to those questions.
I'm guessing you've had to do that before.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's not unusual.
Okay.
And just so it's clear for members of the public that come back and watch recordings and all that stuff, anything we talk about here is just talking back and forth with an app. An actual decision on anything, whether it's the language or the tower itself, is subject to a public hearing. So decisions are made at the public hearing, not necessarily right now here. It's public comment is still accepted, and a final decision is not made until those public hearings.
And that public hearing would be on the second week in March, is what you were indicating. Second meeting in March.
Conceptually, we'll have to go back and look at the calendar and how it all falls out, but it's the whole 10 days from the date it gets published in the paper, and it gets published on a Wednesday, so then you add the 10 days just to make sure it works.
Understood.
Conceptually, if we got a draft done into the paper, likely probably not tomorrow, but then it would go to the paper, published on the 5th. If we add 10 days to the 5th, conceptually then, yes, the 20th would be in that 10 days.
Prepared to do anything I can to make that happen, I guess.
And just for your timing, so we do have that conditional use permit application still out there that you filed. It's just the shot clock is paused
Right.
as we work through this. You would want the language here, whatever it ultimately comes out to be effective before we restart the shot clock, just because you'd want them to reconsider it under the new rules rather than what exists now.
Right.
So that would have to be all effective, and then we can restart it.
Understood.
So there's still some time,
Mhm.
but we're likely still on pace for your fall.
Okay.
I know we've been talking a lot about this, and it is a good service, and we do need it because Brandon is growing, and we need more than one tower here. I live on the south side of town, and I have trouble sometimes with my connection, maybe because I'm too far away from the tower, or there's too many people already trying.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to it. Hope we can iron out all the specifics as soon as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yep.
it. Any other questions for me? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonah. Appreciate your coming out again. Do you need anything more from us, Patrick?
So my takeaway is we will fix those minor things in the drafts. We will wait to fix the overlying terminology and everything that we have to fix. And if we want to address public utility facilities specifically, we'll do that later. Did you want to address the terms for towers on this next draft, or do we just want to wait till we have more time to dig through it separate of?
I guess in my mind, if we want to keep this moving forward, let's do the bare minimum and not complicate things.
Okay.
If we get too much in there, I think that's just going to complicate things, and it could be just
Yep.
one little glitch that could
Yep.
hold us up. So let's keep it simple. Let's get this through, help this entity out, and then let's fix some of the other stuff.
So assuming those changes look good, are you okay with us scheduling things for public hearing whenever it's next possible to do so? And that would be the language change, and we'll talk to them about what they want to do with a rezone, but generally, because you can rezone it any time, but we'll figure out with them what they want to do on the rezone, but the language change for sure, schedule next time that we can.
Going on to page 51, single-family attached dwelling patio exception. This
So-
is discussion only.
Yep. So this is part of that broad discussion we are having about the residential districts broadly. This was kind of the low-hanging fruit that we'll start with. The thing I would possibly change for my own draft is the word duration. I don't know if I like the word duration. That may extend the full duration of the interior dwelling unit lots. There's probably a better term there, whether it's width or length or what have you. But so what it's designed to do is we have that exception for a patio that's less than 12 inches in height, that's open, unenclosed, uncovered, but it has to be 5 feet from side rear lot lines. That works great for a normal house, whether it's a row of townhouses, the interior units, and the one on the end with the shared wall with the interior unit requiring 5 feet. Doesn't seem to be probably the intent. So this is designed to clean that up, and I'm open to your thoughts on whether you think the language does that or if we need to adjust further. And if you want to talk about the residential districts broadly, we may have.
There we go. Oh, Steve Van Busker, 2571 Westlake Drive, Sioux Falls. Patrick had put out an email to the development group asking about zoning, zoning questions, feedbacks, and so the only thing that, I brought up, as you specifically asked about lot sizes, which you heard from Ron, affordable housing, not sometimes, lot sizes matter in that whole context. So if we want houses that can get people started on the housing continuum, they gotta buy their first house before they buy the second house, which is typically where we operate in our business. Is the second and third home is kind of where we typically operate. But to get people started in a house somewhere, we need smaller lots. So we've run up against that. We have the R2 zoning now, right? So that's 65 feet, I think, is what R2 is. So that's the narrower lot width, but I think we can go down to 50 feet in other markets. Not that you see that a lot, but that's what's out there.
R2 is 50 feet.
50 feet? Okay. So I think so we're probably in good shape there then. So, unless we're running into something, as far as the setbacks, I think we're where we need to be for some of the smaller lot sizes. I don't think, sometimes they don't get smaller than that very often, but, anyway, that was my one thought, the flexibility. So I think with R2, we probably got covered. Unless there's some patio setback things. I know we've run into that before too. That's sent some housing projects down the tubes because they couldn't do a patio in the side yard setbacks, or I don't know if Paul remembers what those are about, but I don't know. Sometimes you forget the details along the way, but there's some issues with that when you run into. But there's a meeting coming up, so I think that everyone can kind of bring some of those examples to the table. But happy to answer any questions.
Rob the contractor, what word would be better there instead of duration?
It's meant to be the full span of the lot or the full width. Width we use in other places to describe frontage, so maybe that's not the right word to use, just the.
It says an open, unenclosed, and uncovered deck or paved patio. Does the paved patio have to be uncovered, or would this allow for a covered patio?
This would apply the open, unenclosed, and uncovered to both decks and paved patios.
The only reason I ask, I did a townhome down in T recently that had the patio right on the shared line, and that was covered, or at least partially covered. I don't remember. And I'm wondering if, because there's a lot of people that like covered patios, and if it's part of the the way it's designed, built, whatever, and everyone has one and everyone wants one. I wonder if we want to allow that. I'm not sure, but
The existing language of E is what we have now, and if that's something you want to re-examine, we certainly can. We're going through it broadly. If you see anything you want to address, that's why we're here.
Well, if it's covered, wouldn't it be?
With the roof, you still must have a setback. Roof changes everything.
That basically puts it as part of the structure. So, which would be acceptable as long as the adjacent unit also has structure right up against it.
So are you looking for comments on this? Because it's under discussion.
Yep, I'm just looking for thoughts whether this appears to do what you all intended at the last meeting, whether we figure out the proper word we want to use for duration or span or whatever there. Does this appear to get us in the right direction? Or
I like
solve the issue we were discussing?
I like it, and I had just had the word span in my head too, so. it might be an
And,
option.
extent, reach, span, either of those. Duration always makes me think of time, not physical measurements.
Can we just change it, may extend to the lot line on an interior lot? I guess to maybe to clarify that, so you could have an end unit. So the way this is written, it only addresses the interior lots, but the end units are typically the same, and so they may want to have their patio up against the common lot line.
Yes,
As
so
well.
that's where it picks up after the or. So the full duration of the interior dwelling unit lots or to the common wall side lot line of exterior dwelling units lots. So that's designed to cover the interior of the exterior.
So if we just say may extend to the common lot line, that'll cover all situations.
Is everybody comfortable with that, or are we going back to span?
No, I think that sounds good. It's a simpler way to state it.
Okay, got what you need, Patrick?
Yep.
Okay.
While we're here, is there anything you wanted to discuss about residential districts broadly? Or if we want to keep moving, we certainly can.
Anybody have anything? Or are we moving on to our favorite, signage? Wow, how many hours have we spent on signage? Okay, Moving on, 52, page 52. For discussion only.
So there is a high likelihood we will be getting applications from businesses located close to Interstate 90 requesting larger signs. I think one was sent out to you all for the next meeting. There's a public hearing scheduled. Les Schwab would like a taller sign than is allowed. I think that one just dealt with height and not necessarily size. So from 30 to 50. Whether that solves their problem or not, I don't know. Depends on probably which angle you're viewing the sign. But so there seems to be an express need to increase freestanding signage in commercial districts. And there are several ways you can do it. We can amend the standards broadly if you're interested. If you are thinking about adding a highway business zoning district as its own zoning district, that's a way. If you're addressing a limited issue, overlays are possible. There's several ways we can look at it. So this is more just brought up just as our continuing ongoing efforts to make sure zoning does what we want it to do. So there it seems to be some express interest, and ultimately it's a policy decision. So I am deferring to you all on whether you are interested in addressing it again or not.
Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to address this? I didn't recognize you, so I thought maybe you might be on this topic. If you could just give us your name and address, please.
Ryan Tisdall, 2571 Westlake Drive, Sioux Falls. Our favorite topic, signage. So I'm here on behalf of the owner of the southwest corner of Split Rock and Ash, where the fire was a couple years ago, working on redeveloping that lot. We've been working with the city staff for the last few months to put a project together there, and they've been great to work with. And they, Tammy and Patrick called last week saying that there might be a hiccup with the signage for this property and encouraged me to come to this to talk through a solution. And we had gotten a letter from the city in September kind of outlining the signage that was allowed there, kind of the normal 200 square feet of signage, of pylon or monument signage, pretty standard. I think as this kind of got caught in the fray or discovered as you guys are starting to look at, I think, Brandon 90 Plaza and some of those users who are looking for bigger, taller signage along the interstate. The property I'm working on has an existing billboard on it. And that's, I think, according to Patrick and Tammy, that's what's causing our issue, because it sounds like the current sign ordinance doesn't discern between on-premise signage and off-premise signage. It just counts it all the same. And so at present, it sounds like we're working with a national quick serve restaurant to go on this parcel, and they require a pylon sign. So they will actually be the ones who will apply for the permits on the sign. It's not the property owner, it'll be the tenant. So we're just trying to get out ahead of this to find a solution before they come in permitting. I would speculate that this tenant is kind of a different issue than what's across the street, where I think they're looking for bigger, taller. This tenant, I want to be careful not to speak for them because I've not seen their sign plan, but I think this is going to be just normal run-of-the-mill signage. They're just looking for a normal pylon sign. And this property had a normal pylon sign for several years along with the billboard. It was accidentally removed when they took the burnt building away. The contractor who took the building away was given specific instructions: don't touch the sign, just leave it there. Well, then he took the sign. So accidents happen, but we just, I guess need to figure out the best way to solve it. I think that's really all my main points. I guess in short, what solves the problem on this property is just treating a billboard differently than an on-premise signage for a business on that property. And it's my understanding that this was actually maybe changed in the most recent update of the sign ordinance, because is it my understanding that they used to be kind of viewed separately, but now
There was
they're-
a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Reed versus Gilbert, that you cannot look at the content of the sign and set regulations based on its content. There are sneaky workarounds you can do, like you can't say real estate sign, here's your sign. But you can say a sign while a property is for sale, lease, or rent. There are little legal shenanigans you can do, but you can't say it's this, so it has to be that. So you can't have a real estate sign. You can't say church sign or a special event sign, or you can't label it based on what its content is. And our position is, in order to know whether it is relating to something on or off the premise, you have to look at the content of the sign to know. So a while back, you all went through it. Probably not all of you here now, but the past P&Z board went through it and eliminated the distinction between the two, because if you can't look at content, the distinction didn't make sense anymore. So they set a standard number. We don't care what the content is. Here's your number. So that did not distinguish between whether it's a billboard or whatever. So a freestanding sign is anything not attached to a building. That definition is broad. So it's attached to a building or not. If it's attached to a building, it's a wall sign. If it's not, it's a freestanding sign. That's a billboard. That's everything else. So that's kind of where we are at now.
And as I've worked in different communities in the area, all of them have essentially adopted similar sign code that does discern the difference between an off-premise billboard and an on-premise sign for the business. So this was actually the first time I had run into this issue. Because as I'm driving down Split Rock and I see a sign for Sunshine or Tony's Catering or Taco John's, to me, I just view that sign differently than a billboard for First National Bank or Alliance Communications, where it's more advertising. In my head, I'm not necessarily judging the content, but it's more the kind of sign it is. In short, my issue is solved, or this property owner's issue is solved by treating a billboard separately from an on-premise sign, which I think is a little bit different issue from my understanding from the tenants across the road of what they're looking for. So for mine, it's more discerning between the two. I was talking with the owner of a billboard company yesterday, and his comment was, he said, most communities want to limit the ability to develop billboards in some way. Most communities have some mechanism to control it. He said when a code kind of goes this direction, he said it can have the opposite effect, where if there's no deciphering the difference between a billboard and an on-premise sign, he said there's really nothing stopping from almost every property owner, if they wanted to turn their sign into a billboard and start selling advertising. He said that's why most communities will treat a billboard differently, and almost always you're going to put rules around it. You can't have them within X number of feet of another billboard, and you can't have them in certain areas. I think in Sioux Falls there's only certain streets they're allowed on. You drive down 10th Street in Sioux Falls, you see many billboards. You drive down 57th Street and there's no billboards. So many communities will, kind of mark where a billboard can go or where they can't go. And then I also want to note that on this particular property, the existing billboard, the property owner does not have the contractual right to get rid of that billboard. They signed a billboard lease and it goes for several more decades. So it's not a case where they have any ability to get rid of it. So we're just looking to you guys for your insight and advice and policy for how we get past this so we can help bring another new business to Brandon.
So just for context on that lot, the conversation we had was the existing billboard on the lot is roughly 288 square feet or so. That seems to be standard billboard size, obviously greater than 200. It's still on the lot, so that eats up their 200 allotment. So that's the issue where we're at. So that would prevent a future sign for the business that wants to locate there.
And I think, so this lot has a total lineal, so I'm just going off of what we got from the city. The total lineal feet is 481 feet because it sits on a corner. And is it, if it's over 400, you can have two different signs? Aside from the total square footage allowed,
Yes.
is that the
You can have another sign, but you're still capped out
At the
max. You
200.
could just have, you could just divide it in half and have two instead of one.
And as I've seen this particular tenant who's looking to go here, there are other sign plans from other locations. It's my understanding and expectation here that their sign will actually be far less than the 200 square feet that's allowed. I don't believe they're looking for what the tenants across the street are looking for. I think they're just looking for a normal pylon sign for their business.
Have they looked into buying the lease back?
The answer is no. Having worked with Lamar, they're not the most flexible company. I'm guessing they would look at it as they invested a significant amount of money to put that billboard there, which is why they signed such long-term contracts on locations. I don't know. Steve has a similar but different issue, and his billboard lease has far less time on it, and I don't even know that it's going to be possible in that one. But I don't believe buying the billboard out is probably a viable option here.
You got something, Steve?
Yeah, it's, yeah, I got,
Thanks, Ryan.
Steve Van Buskirk again, 2571 Westlake Drive, Sioux Falls. Similar situation. It's interesting with the 200 square foot of the business where billboards and the pylons get wrapped in together, just what Ryan was talking about there. When that gets wrapped in together, how that impacts us in River Park. If you go out there, and I sent Patrick, I don't know if you can pull up a sign or whatever, or a picture of it, but there's a billboard sign out there that's probably way bigger than 288 square feet, because I think it's probably double of what it is on the other site. So we all work together. We just rezone that as general business with the idea that we're gonna work our tails off and put it'd be the other way, off to the east. We're gonna work our tails off and get some general business in here and try to grow the economy of Brandon and get some services into Brandon. Well, with the sign ordinance, that sign right there, again, depending on how you read this lease, we got 10 years of that sign is when we bought that property, that sign was obligated to be there for another 10 years. And I doubt it's feasible to buy them out, because they're going to look at all the income stream going forward to buy them out. But we've got a sign there that's sitting there on a 10-year lease, sitting on a brand new general business development that we're doing all this development work over there. And the people that we're trying to get on that site, they won't look at the site if they can't get a pylon sign, and not anything bigger than 200 square feet, not anything bigger than the general business district that's allowed in every other lot. That's not what we're thinking about. They need their signage on their lot. So we got to uncouple the billboard sign from the general business signage, because they're just two different things. Because that takes that site off the market for 10 years, because we can't sell that property because of the signage ordinance.
So the people who own the billboard do not own the land under it?
That's correct. Yeah, it's an annual lease payment, and
Okay, but the people that they leased the land, so the people who own the billboard leased the land from whoever. Now, if the owner of the land changes and the new owner says, no, I will not lease you, they say, we have a lease agreement, and they say, well, you have a lease agreement with a former owner, that's not us, we own the land now.
that's not how the leases are written. They keep going.
Oh,
So, and this lease was actually signed in 2015, because I think you changed the sign ordinance in 2016, is what I'm guessing. So this was signed months.
Sounds right, 2016 to 2018, somewhere in there. 'Cause
So
the Reed case was 2015, I think.
So whenever, this was signed right before the sign ordinance changed, so the lease rides with the property, as ag property. I mean, there's, no matter who owns it, until the lease is up. And then if you don't send them a notification 6 months before the expiration of the lease, it keeps going. So if you're sleeping at the wheel, it might it might kick on for, well, depending on what the lease is. This thing, I think it's another 5 years if you don't send a notice within 60 days of the expiration of the lease. So here's another situation of development. I mean, this is kind of another piece of development where we got a general business district. I don't think we need, from what I know today, I don't think we need any more than what general business allows for signage. With the wall signage. I think it's 1 for every 3 square feet, and the 200 square feet of pylon signage. That's all good from our perspective, but in this situation, it won't work, and they'll say, I can't put up a sign. I'll see you later, which is the exact same situation here. You can't, the question is whether or not a sign can go up. That's been there. So so somehow we need to have a billboard mechanism, and if we don't want billboards, then we need to adopt an ordinance and say, let's get rid of billboards, generically. And then once these things start expiring, then we can start getting rid of them. If that's what we want as a community, that's great. But in the meantime, what do we do here? Because we've got, a year of work into this thing, with which, as of September, we're saying everything's fine, keep going. And when it came up across the street, then it's like, ooh, wait, maybe you guys are out of compliance. So anyway, so if we, as we're looking at this signage code, if we could take a look at, this issue with this signage, and I think, considering the billboard, because we, Patrick and I emailed back and forth, you can't really, deed it off. Well, back to that cell phone conversation we just had here. So you can't really, that was one thing you're speculating on in the email, I think, was platted off in a separate lot. Well, that won't work, because, we just talked about setbacks here with the cell phone tower, so that won't work. So I don't know what the solution would be, unless you've thought about something in between here and our email a couple days ago of how you can open a general business with the need of 200 square feet of pylon signage per code with a billboard sign on it. I don't know what the solution. The solution is change it to industrial zoning, and then we can put a bigger sign on it, apparently. I don't know, H1 and L1, I don't know, you said is more unlimited. I don't know if that was the right word that you used, but.
There is no cap in the industrial districts on signage size. So conceptually, yes. There is the requirement of separation distances for billboards, the 500 feet or whatever, but there is no 200-foot cap.
Yeah, so that's, so there's, yeah, Barb's all of our favorite subjects, signage. So we spend more time talking about signage than we ever really want to. But so I mean, there's two situations, a new development and a redevelopment, and I think the simple the simple solution, the high level solution, is decouple the billboards from the pylon signage. The billboards are a specific issue. And the general business signage should be standalone. If the property needs general business sign, that's why you've got the ordinance to allow that general business signage for business to succeed and come here. We got to be able to have that ability if we're stuck with a billboard sign, one way or another. And then we can adopt something with a billboard sign and just say, hey, we don't want these things. If that's it, it's, then we can limit it that way. And it's, and it was kind of interesting too, Patrick, you're talking about, the distinction between off premise. I'm kind of wrapping your comments in with Ryan's comments, talking to that signage executive or the signage owner, where every building we've got, we could put a 200 square foot billboard sign on it. Apparently, that's what we could do, is we could start advertising out every retail building that we've got, because so your ordinance doesn't allow anything for content, but you were talking earlier, that's how you determine the content's how you determine if it's a billboard sign or a pylon sign, so that's how you said you were doing it. That's how you can tell after it's all done, is if it's if it's an off-site sign or an on-site sign. So you're actually going back to the definition of the purpose of what the ordinance is, which is to not judge them on content. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, if we want to go back to our building signage, we could throw up 200 square foot signs and advertise HGN or whoever's up there on the sign, or Wellmark, or Alliance Communication, I guess, is up there. So I reckon that, so anyways, we needed, that's not the intent, but it's, this stuff bubbles out in a strange way. But I think what we need here, we're working with Ryan and his client, trying to help him build this building, and timelines are getting short, and we've got permit that's going to be issued on Friday, is what Tammy's telling us. So that's good. That's what I heard. Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to get this thing going, and the signage thing just popped up at the because of what's going on across the street. So we would ask, I think this solves both situations, if general business districts can have their own signage package, and billboards or off-premise signage or whatever the proper terminology is treated differently and separately. That'll allow development in River Park to go forward, and that'll allow retail to go forward on this other site as well. So we think that's the solution. That's what we've been talking about. I don't know if you have any.
Before you step away, just to let you know, we rewrote our ordinance because of that sign.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well. Working on it.
Go ahead.
When was the new sign ordinance, when did that take effect? Do you know that offhand?
We can look. There's a little
did you say
legislative history
2015?
blurb on the end, so we'll see what it shows. Likely somewhere between 2016 and 2019.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I don't think that was a pandemic time era that we worked on. I think it was before that.
Okay. Because on the property that I'm working on, there was an existing pylon sign, and I thought it said it was during the current sign ordinance, but where that billboard was added with an existing pylon already there. I do think there's definitely a way to categorize different types of signs without judging the content, because I've worked on several instances where you have a normal pylon sign for the business, you have a billboard sign, then you have directional signage. I remember when we did the Scooters Coffee deal over on Holly, and Scooters needed a directional sign, and so there were different ways to accommodate different signage needs. If you have a medical facility and you need the ER, the urgent care marked clearly, I think signage is always a really important piece of how a lot of these businesses function. So I guess we're looking to you guys for how we could find a solution.
Well, going forward, I don't think that with our current ordinance, and it wasn't part of the previous conversation, but I don't think billboards are what we want. So going forward, we wouldn't want to be looking at a situation where we have a business that has a sign and they're like, hey, can we put up a billboard as well? I think with our current ordinance, we wouldn't allow that sign in particular, but I don't think that's what our intent would be. So best case scenario, we'd be looking at a variance here. And I'm not going to say whether we would do that or not, but I just to be clear, my position on signs would be, we wouldn't want a pylon sign and a billboard. So, even, because the content of the sign doesn't really matter. It's what we're looking at is the skyline. When people come into town, do we want a bunch of signs or a bunch of trees? And, you know, so I guess as far as that goes, that billboard sign under the current ordinance wouldn't be allowed, and I'm okay with that if it wasn't allowed. How do we solve the problem? I don't know. I think a variance is something we would discuss, and I'm not going to say what way that would go, but I understand the need for a business to have signage. I get that. We just want it to fit in our community. You know, this is Brandon. It's not Sioux Falls. People move to Brandon because it's not Sioux Falls. That's kind of the,
Yep.
you know, but we want businesses to come to Brandon, you know, so we want to be cognizant of that. We want to be welcoming, so we need to find ways that work. So, you know, a variance is something that could be discussed. You can make your plea for that. I don't, you know, if, for example, a garden shed, if you have a house, you have a garden shed. If you were in a situation where you had two garden sheds before the current ordinance came in, and one of the garden sheds was non-conforming, and someone accidentally took it off the property, you couldn't bring it back in. That's just how it works. So your sign that got removed, that's unfortunate, but it's not as easy to say, well, it was an accident. That's, you know, we would have to look at a variance to make that work, because I don't think we're going to change the ordinance to allow for a pylon sign and a billboard.
Why don't you just ban billboards?
Well,
You can do that?
not the,
What if you banned any new ones and
currently that wouldn't be allowed under current ordinance. It's too, yeah, it's
Right.
too tall and too big, so it wouldn't be allowed. That sign wouldn't be currently allowed. So if that was a blank slate right now, you could have your pylon sign, but you couldn't have a pylon sign and a billboard.
Right, yep.
You know, so
And I think that's where the language that you worked on works, you know, if it's coming in, you know, because then you can look at it and deal with it at that time. You wouldn't allow it, but it's, you know, like these situations where it's there, you know, so it.
We had to,
so
we had to work with what we have already in Brandon when we rewrote the ordinance, because we had billboard signs in Brandon already. But yet we had to be restrictive to basically prevent new ones from coming in.
Right,
I think only one has been built since that ordinance.
right. Which.
And that was in the works
I'm
already.
agreeing with you. This works for new ones coming in, you know, but you set up the ordinance to leave the ones alone that were there is what you know, what you have to be
But we
conscious.
have to allow them to
You have to allow.
make
yeah.
modifications to what's there already.
Exactly. So
So we have to allow them.
right. So it works as long as there's no change from, you know, here, you know, any development change. So that's where it gets caught. So it's.
You need to understand, so if we allow a variance in Ryan's situation, and we allow a property owner to put up another freestanding sign on the property, then they're gonna go, well, geez, you know, we can still put our sign up, but we can also get money off of this sign we're renting. And they can continue to re-contract the lease for another, how many decades? And so that doesn't solve the problem, because the landowners are still gonna make money off of that other sign that we allow them to keep.
the billboard that's by Sunshine next to that car wash, there's a sign for the car wash next to their billboard sign. The question that was posed to me was if somebody backed into that sign for the car wash and it fell over and they want to put it back up because it was an accident, how would that be treated? Would you, I mean, would the city stand and say to a business owner who owns a small car wash, you can't put your sign back up because somebody hit it? And that question was posed to me. That's not my question. But they said, you know, when we told this contractor not to take this sign down, and they didn't listen, and we go out there and they take it down, they had taken it down. The owner of of the property. He's like, what am I supposed to do? It was an accident. The guy was told repeatedly not to touch the pylon sign. And, you know, it's a case where you have a property that had a pylon sign and a billboard for decades, many, many years. And now they're trying to clean this lot up. We're essentially, I think, close to done with permitting. And I mean, this is a contingency in the deal. This business has the ability to terminate this deal if they don't get a pylon sign. So, I mean, as we look at, you know, we're trying to increase sales tax revenue. I'm not saying a retailer should be able to do whatever they want, but you know, this is where, you know,
I do
somebody
understand.
once said to me, don't let the code get in the way of a good decision. I think
But
they
they can put their advertising on that billboard.
They can't though.
Yes, they can lease with the people that are leasing the billboard from them, and they can advertise on that billboard. So they have the opportunity to advertise on their site.
But that would not be a reasonable answer because that billboard costs, say, $1,500 a month. A national tenant isn't going to spend $1,500 per site, so $3,000 a month, $40,000 a year. They're not going to spend that kind of money to advertise on that billboard. This would be a mechanism to keep a new business out of Brandon, and that's, I don't think, what any of us want. So that's, you know, like when Tammy and Patrick called, you know, the spirit of our conversation was very much let's find a solution. Let's have a can-do attitude, and I'm, you know, hoping that we can all, you know, get to that there's an answer here, because we're trying to bring new businesses to Brandon, and this is one of those moments where we have to make a decision to do that.
To pull parliamentary procedure, this is not an item that was on the agenda. I mean, it's not even under discussion, and so we can't give you an answer. I mean, we just can't do that. So I don't know if we bring it back again. I was not aware of this issue. So what do we do? I know you have a time constraint. I understand that.
I was told it was on the agenda.
So the topic is broadly on the agenda. If you want it specific to
Under discussion?
the sign it at 1001 North Split Rock.
Well, it's under discussion. So when we have discussion, we can't come forward with a resolution, I don't believe, correct?
The intent was to start the conversation generally.
The building to the south of there is, I'm not sure, is that part of the old Laverne company? I think it's one of their warehouses maybe, but I'm just kind of thinking outside the box here. There's a building to the south there that's a separate parcel that doesn't have a sign on it. Has that Brandon sign. Maybe they're getting paid for that Brandon sign, so maybe that would count. So that wouldn't work, but if you could sell off a little jog of that lot that contained the billboard, and then you could put up I know that sounds a little funky, but
We wouldn't. So it would come down to the size of the lot created. Would we allow them to?
if you
plat?
combined it with the lot, if the people to the south would buy that billboard for the lease, I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box to try to get you a sign.
Yeah, that's goofy. I don't know. I appreciate the creativity here. I'm not sure. You know, and this property owner, he made a point to me. He said, you know, that Brandon sign, he said, that encroaches on my property illegally. And I'm being a very nice neighbor, and I'm not making the city of Brandon move any part of the sign or the landscaping. He said, I'm asking for the city of Brandon to be a good neighbor back.
So, on that, so one thing to consider with, if you're talking about how to, address, I mean, you can, to address this sign, you know, the one on the highway signage, because I don't know what the overlay district is that you're talking about, but you could allow, it's, you know, we talked about that, you could put the overlay district over top of this sign, which there's something going on with the motels or the hotels too, there's a signage situation there as well. is what I heard something about. You know, so you could, you know, if you're getting in and you're starting to talk about overlay districts to allow, you know, to change the signage code to go higher on the signs for those, I think it's Les Schwab and who's it? There's two people that are gonna
Quick
request.
Star.
Quick Star, so I don't know if they're just going higher or if they're going bigger. What are they talking about?
Les Schwab has submitted their variance to be taller.
And
Quick
it's,
Star has not yet submitted anything.
and so is it bigger than 200 square feet or is it 200 square feet?
It would be 200 square feet or below, just taller.
In the hotel situation, what we're trying to do is do research, like one of McDonald's, Circle K, the hotels, to see what's existing as we go into the variance hearings down the road. That's the research.
Right. So, you know, so I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to catch some loose ends like that, you know, I mean, so I'm not sure what the hotel thing is, other than there's something going on with the hotels and there's research going on. So I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, if you're trying to find, you know, solutions for this, I mean, this, you know, an overlay district's going to give, instead of a 30-foot sign, a whatever foot sign, you know, that's what the discussion is tonight. This is kitty corner across the street, so we're not very far away. You know, because you know, so that's a possible solution. I mean, so if you know, the creativity thing, you know, so I mean, if you're starting to look at that to solve the problem of other retailers, you know, this retailer's problem, because all these signs have different looks. I mean, it's, you know, are different purposes. You know, the billboard signs, that is off-premise advertising. It's not for the business. You know, usually I don't think I've ever seen them for a business that's there. The pylon signage in this case is identification signs, so people can see it going up and down, so they pull over and buy the goods. You know, it's meant to be more, you know, pedestrian level, you know, and that's what your 30-foot sign is, you know, to try to grab their attention, so they know where they're going, you know. So every sign does a little bit, serves a little bit different purpose. So the billboard